So you think you know everything about the NPP government? What if I told you that a lot of what you've heard isn't actually true? Like many people in Sri Lanka, I was overwhelmed by the flood of stories going around. My WhatsApp was full of messages claiming that the NPP would take away religious freedoms, that they were violent, and that they didn't have the experience to run the country. Honestly, it made me anxious. But instead of believing all the rumors, I decided to dig deeper. I began following trusted sources like BBC, The Diplomat, Reuters, and the World Bank. Let me share what I found. Oh, there's also a free PDF with everything I've explained here, along with the reference articles. Before the elections, people were saying the NPP would ban Buddhist traditions like the Parahara, stop Muslims from wearing scarves, and limit Hindu and Christian ceremonies. Religion is such a huge part of our lives, so I get why we were worried. But when the NPP came to power, none of this happened. President Anura and other leaders visited temples, mosques, churches, and Hindu shrines, showing their commitment to protecting everyone's right to practice their faith. Those fears? Completely baseless. And then there was the fear of chaos. People were saying that if the NPP took over, the country would fall apart. Riots, destruction, everything spiraling out of control. Some people even started panic buying, expecting curfews and complete shutdowns. But what actually happened? The transition of power turned out to be one of the smoothest in Sri Lanka's history. No violence, no unrest, just a peaceful handover of leadership. This wasn't by chance either. Many NPP members had consistently promoted peace and stability throughout their campaigns, making it clear that their focus was on a calm, controlled transition.
එදාට ඕගොල්ලොත් හිතක් තියන්න ඒගොල්ලෝ ගිහලා හම්බු වෙන්න මොන හරි පළතුරක් තියෙනවා නම් ඒකක් අරගෙන ගිහලා ඒගොල්ලන්ට කියන්න අපි යාළුයි අපි මීට පස්සේ ඒ වගේ නැහැ අපි ඔක්කොම ලක්ම වගේ දරුවන් ඒගොල්ලන්ව බදා ගන්න කොහොම බදා ගන්න ඕනේ දන්නවද ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ ඇස් වලින් කඳුළු එන්න ඕනේ.
What surprised me even more was how quickly the president moved to cut waste. He's been vocal against unnecessary spending for years.
පාරේ යනකොට කාර් දෙක තුනක් කරගෙන යනක පිළිගන්න පුළුවන් කර සභාපතිතුමනි. එක කාර් එක හුලං ගියොත් අනිත් කාර් එකට නගින්න පුළුවන්. උඩින් යනකොට හෙලිකොප්ටර් තුනක් කරගෙන යන්නේ මොකටද? එකක ප්‍රශ්නයක් આવොත් අනිත් එකට පනින්නද?
And he followed through. Luxury expenses, unnecessary government vehicles, and excessive security were all trimmed down. They even cut wasteful government events, making sure funds went to things that really matter, like social welfare. And the focus wasn't just on saving money. They implemented real measures to ensure transparency and accountability in government. This included appointing honest officials and putting systems in place to root out the corruption that had plagued past administrations. A lot of people doubted whether the NPP could actually manage the government. Some even said, "How can they run the country with just 3 members? We'll be stuck in another economic crisis, standing in queues all over again." But they proved everyone wrong. One of the first things they did was renegotiate the $2.9 billion IMF bailout. And instead of piling the burden onto the poorest Sri Lankans, they restructured the economy to protect the most vulnerable. They weren't just focusing on debt, they were thinking long-term. But that wasn't all. Shortly after securing the IMF deal, the World Bank stepped in with a $200 million loan to further support economic recovery. This loan is designed to boost economic reforms, growth, and protect vulnerable communities. It builds on a previous $500 million loan from the World Bank, further reinforcing the NPP's commitment to stabilizing the country. And let me tell you, within just 2 weeks of the NPP coming to power, they've done a pretty impressive job so far. But I'll be keeping a close eye on everything they're doing and will keep you updated on what happens next. Let's see how everything unfolds in the coming months. In the past, governments borrowed too much and handed out too much financial help, which led to massive debt. And that's why we're in this economic mess now. But the NPP, they're taking a different approach. They're focusing on targeted programs to help the poorest, making sure money isn't wasted. They're working with the IMF to reduce debt while still supporting those in need. What impressed me most was the NPP's focus on making Sri Lanka self-sufficient. They're promoting agriculture and manufacturing, reducing our dependence on foreign loans, and boosting local production. They've also made education a priority, building a skilled workforce to set Sri Lanka up for long-term success. One rumor that kept coming up was about President Anura's lack of fluency in English and how it might hurt our relationships with other countries. I admit, I was worried about that too. But it turns out, language doesn't define leadership. The NPP has maintained strong ties with key global partners. They're working together with India on energy and maritime projects, despite concerns over some deals. Diplomatic relations with China remain strong, especially with initiatives like the Belt and Road Project, though the NPP is careful not to rely too heavily on China. They've also strengthened ties with the US and other Western countries, focusing on economic cooperation and reforms. The NPP has balanced these relationships well, protecting Sri Lanka's independence while building strong partnerships. So, did the economy collapse under the NPP like some people feared? Not at all. Inflation, which was 46.4% in 2022, is expected to drop to 25% by the end of 2024. And foreign investment? It's looking strong, with $1 billion expected next year. Clearly, people believe in their policies. Looking ahead, the World Bank predicts Sri Lanka will see 2.2% growth in 2024 as the NPP's reforms continue. Poverty is still a huge challenge, with 25.9% of people affected, but the reforms are expected to improve these numbers over time. If you want a PDF with more information and reference articles, download it from the link below. To be honest, I wasn't sure about the NPP at first, but after doing my research and seeing what they've actually achieved, I can confidently say that the fears people had just don't hold up. The NPP is fixing the economy, strengthening international ties, and being transparent. The biggest mistake people made? Underestimating them. And if you're curious about healthcare, stick around. My next video will break down the NPP's healthcare reforms and how they're making a difference.